Chris, and welcome to another installment of the Virtual Art Room. So today we are going to be working on a sketch journal page, and you have spent the first semester doing sketch journal pages, and it's time to advance your techniques. So we're going to do a couple different techniques that are different and a little innovative, and maybe even might say a little risk-taking, but they're going to use a lot of different supplies than we've used in the past. And in just a few minutes, I'm going to share all the supplies I have in front of me. They're all things that are in the art room, or you could find most of them pretty quickly and commonly around your home. So the most important thing, obviously, I need is my sketch journal, and I need my prompt. So our prompt for this particular journal entry is all about the idea of what pushes your buttons. So think about it in terms of what either gets you really upset or what either really makes you happy and excited. So think about what really pushes your buttons. So in my mind, I have been working on the idea of what pushes my buttons. And I started thinking about when my own children at home chew loudly with their mouth open at the dinner table. So I was thinking of that chomping and that chawing sound, and I was thinking back to when my own kids were younger and when they all had braces and food would get caught in those braces. So that was one of the things that really pushed my buttons. I could hardly sit at the dinner table with them and not think about how that bothered me. So in class, I'm going to give you a bin of buttons to choose through, and there are all a variety of colors and shapes and sizes. So I just have a little sampling here of some of those buttons. I'm going to walk around and give you a choice. You're going to pick out a minimum of 3 buttons. Of course, if you're at home, any random buttons will do. You choose, but I need you to have at least 3. I'd like a nice odd number. You could choose more, but that's up to you. My particular journal entry, I am using a few new techniques. So in a second, when you see the supplies on there, you're going to notice that I had what's called a slam wall. So a slam wall is nothing more than literally what it sounds like, where someone slams a bunch of words that are related to the same topic on one piece of paper. So shared in our Google Drive in Schoology, you will see an opportunity for you on a blank piece of paper as a class to slam a bunch of words down that are related to the topic that pushes your buttons. So if you look at what I have here, they're all words that relate to the things that I think of when I think of people chewing with their mouth open. I changed the size and the scale of them, and I also changed the font so they were a little bit more interesting. So we're going to do a couple different techniques, and then I will show you those techniques once you look at the supply list. So let's take a look at the supply list for a moment. So here are a few of the supplies that you could be using. All of these will be made available in class, but of course you could also find most of these things at home. So of course I have my sketch journal. I have some random papers, and including in that, I don't have them here right now, but I have some book pages that I found from old books. I have a bunch of buttons, just random buttons. I have some liquid watercolor in spray bottles that you can have. I have all the colors. I have some instant coffee that I've already made up and made it kind of thick and gloopy, almost like road tar. I of course got glue, some brushes, a pair of scissors, a container of water, and of course, randomly you might ask, what do you have here? I actually have what's called metal tape. So you can find this at any hardware store. I have a roll for you guys in class to use, but it's actually used to join 2 pieces of heating ventilation together. It's actually what contractors and installers use. So it has an adhesive back that you can peel off, and of course it looks and acts just like metal. So I'm going to show you all of these things and how we can use them. Now that you've seen the supply list, let's talk about this slam wall a little more. So after you've typed on the words, and everyone else in our class has typed on the words, and I print them out, I'm going to have a variety of copies of the same exact slam wall for you to use. You can do a couple different things. So the first thing I could do with the slam wall is make a graffiti wall. So kind of think of it like New York City's subway. After years and years of people putting up promotional posters on the same wall, they wear off, they get ripped down, people graffiti on them. So basically what we want is a wall that's very messy with text all over it, and some of the posters and some of the words have been ripped. So that's really easy to create inside of your sketch journal. So inside of mine, I chose to actually start with a slam wall. So I've got one side finished and one side that isn't. So what I did was I took a page of those slam wall words and I glued it very quickly and not particularly very well on top of a page in my sketchbook. And you'll notice that it hangs off the edges and it's rather random. I could also incorporate other types of words or text. So I happen to have an old dictionary page here that I could glue on. And again, I don't want to do it very well. I want it to look a little sloppy on purpose because I want it to look as if it were on an old subway system in New York, and I'm going to put some graffiti on top of it. So I'm going to glue that down also. And again, as random as I want. So let's take a look at what you can do once you've glued those pages down. This slam wall or graffiti wall that I'm creating is a layered approach to making a background. So this is one unique way to add text to create a really rich background. Because remember, I am eventually going to put on top of this a little bit about my topic, which is the idea of being bothered by the things that sort of push my buttons. So my glue has dried a little bit on both pages, and now I'm going to do my favorite part, which is to do the ripping. So I'm going to get out my anger, I'm going to get out my frustration, and I'm going to start tearing some of it. And I'm going to intentionally make it messy. And I want it to look sort of old, like it's been there for years and years and years. And so the longer you let the glue dry, the better, right? Because we want it to look old and sort of distressed. So I'm going to take all of the leftover pages out here, and I might actually glue them on other pages later. So I'm going to set those aside for now. And I'm going to maybe pick at this just a little bit more. And you can see just some of the words end up showing through. But I don't want them to hang off the pages of my journal. I want them to be nice and clean along the edges. I'm pretty happy with that. I think that looks pretty good. So now I want to age it. I want to make it look a little bit older. Now I could be using some found papers that I could glue in and do the exact same process that I did with the words. Or I could also use a little bit of coffee. So I'm going to actually use a little bit of instant coffee that I made up ahead of time and I have for all of you guys. And honestly, I'm probably also going to use a little bit of water. And I want it to look old, so nothing makes something look older faster than by putting a little bit of coffee on it. So I'm going to take that coffee and I'm just going to start spreading it on. So this is great because there are no real rules and we allow it to be a little bit messy and sloppy, and we want it to look drippy, so sometimes you might drip the paint. But you want it to look old, as if it's been here for many, 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 many years. And it's just sort of outlived its life, but it creates a really cool textural background. So that's one option you could use. You could do something like that. So I'm going to incorporate a little bit of water on there, and I might want to take a little bit of watercolor or watercolor pencil, or I might want to take just a tiny bit of acrylic paint. You have options to do that as well. So I'm going to put just a tiny little bit of watercolor on there too. And normally I would do this, so I would do it far away from everything else so I don't get paint on everything else that I've got laid out. So I'm going to push some of my things away, and I'm going to just use only the purple. I'm going to move some of these elements for now, and I'm going to just give it a little bit of spray. So I can spray it right on top of the wet coffee, and what I love about that is that will sort of make it look old also, right? So let's do one more. Maybe add just a little bit of water. Push that back for you guys. And you can start to see I've got what looks like an old-fashioned sort of graffiti wall. So that's one technique that I could be using. So technique number 2 that you could use as part of your sketch journal entry for this month, you could take the slam wall or the words that you've typed out, and we could make them into your own personal stickers. So I'm going to show you how to make cheap, inexpensive stickers. You only need a few things. You need a little small container of water, which I've got here. You need a roll of clear packing tape, and you're going to need something that has been printed on copy printer ink, not on computer printer ink. So if you're at home and you have a small printer as part of your home computer, that will not work because for some reason the ink is more expensive and the ink doesn't want to transfer onto the packing tape. So you need them to be a cheap photocopy. So if you're here at school with me, anything that I give you from the photocopy machine will work. Anything that would come from a home printer won't be so successful. It doesn't matter whether it's color or black and white. So I've got some words here. I'm going to take some packing tape and I'm going to peel off a strip of that packing tape, and I'm going to place it directly over top of one or more words. So in this case, I'm just going to do one line of words. I'm not going to do a bunch. But if I had an image or a picture that was color and it was really big, I could put several pieces of packing tape over it for it to work. So there we go. I'm going to put packing tape over top of that. I'm going to cut off the excess of that packing tape, and I'm going to now trim around anything that isn't covered by tape. So you can see, probably just with a little bit of glare, you can see part of it that doesn't have tape on it. So I'm going to cut all that extra off because I don't need that to get wet and make a sloppy mess any more than I'm about to make. So finish cutting that out. And now I'm going to take that word that's now covered in tape. I'm going to make sure the tape is pressed on really hard, and I'm going to soak it in water. So off to the side here of the camera, you can see sitting in there floating is my word sitting in water. In the meantime, I already had one started. I'm like a cooking show over here. I've already got half the meal made back in the oven. So I have a word or series of words that have been soaking in water for about 5 minutes. So you only need about 5 minutes for this to work. And I'm going to take this, I'm going to pull it up so you can see it, and I'm going to take my thumb. I'm going to start felting the paper. That's literally what it means. It means I'm peeling back the paper. And what you'll notice is that the word or whatever image is there is sticking to the tape. It no longer is sticking to the paper. And it takes you a few minutes. And honestly, sometimes I redunk it in water. You do not, repeat, do not want to do this in the sink because we will clog the sink with all these little paper fibers. So I'm going to finish peeling that off. And in just a minute, I am going to have a sticker. Now you might say, well, you've just soaked that in water. It's not going to be sticky anymore. Good news, as soon as the tape starts to dry, it will regain its stickiness. So finish felting the paper, peeling off all of the background paper. And sometimes I soak it one more time just to get all of the excess little paper filaments and fibers on there. And I now have a sticker that I can stick anywhere. I'm going to move this. So right here, probably hard to see, but you can see it says spill and drippy. I could cut this apart with scissors, so I have 2 stickers. And I could put these over top of my word wall. So I'm going to stick drippy there, and I'll put spill there. And now I've got even more words to add to my graffiti background. So there's technique number 2. So technique number 3 really isn't any that big of a technique. It's just to be using some other type of paper. So as I mentioned before, I have in the classroom a bunch of old scrapbook paper that you could use and glue on to use in the background. Or you could use something inventive like my metal tape, which cuts and works just like tape in the fact that you can cut it in any shape you want. You could use an X-Acto knife, but what I love is that it has an adhesive background, so you just peel off the back. You know I'm going to be on camera sitting here peeling this off, and it makes for exciting video. So I'm not going to peel all that off. Maybe I am. Oh, look. Bam. Got it. Maybe. There we go. So it comes off, and now you have one giant foil sticker that you could put on anywhere. And what I love about this is you could take a pencil or a pen and you could emboss it so it looks like hammered metal. You could make it look like it has nail heads. You could use it in a variety of different ways. So just to give you an example of what I did with mine, I'm going to peel back. I'll flip through my sketch journal and we'll go to my entry. So I told you that I'm bothered by my kids when they chew loudly, so you can see my stickers on here, you can see my metal foil, and I even used the foil to make the braces on my kid's mouth. And as an element of surprise, because I told you that you could add one element of surprise in the instructions that I shared with you, I wrote all about how it bothers me when they chew loudly on the giant tongue that sticks out. So the tongue is dimensional. Not only does it fold so that it hides inside the journal, but it's also 3-dimensional and that it curls also. As you can see, more metal tape underneath. So this is a graffiti back wall. And then you can see at the end, I actually took the buttons that I chose out of the pile and I used those, as well as I used a marker to make some other circles, and I glued them on in the background. So this is what pushes my buttons. I even have a few random pieces of cut strip pieces of paper that I wanted to look like food trapped in their braces, so I added that as well. So you can see all of the requirements of this assignment on my finished work. You can see value and shading. You can see how that tongue used colored pencil. I not only used the pinks, I actually used a little bit of blues, and I even used, it's hard to tell, but even a little bit of green, because as we know, red and pink are in the same color wheel family. They're a tint of each other. is a tint, pink is a tint of red. And so then I used a little bit of blue-green to dull it out so that it looked more shaded, obviously. I even shaded the teeth. You can see that there are places where they are whiter and places where they are darker. I even shaded the lips. It's a little easier to see here on the bottom. But all of the element that I cut out and glued into my sketchbook happens to have full shaded value. So your assignment needs to have a full value. It needs to have a clear focal point, one thing that's drawing our attention to it. You'll notice that I used the metal tape to create convergence as well, something we learned last semester. So I wanted it to converge on that mouth, so it made it even easier to see. And I even placed my mouth on the rule of thirds. So you'll note that I understand a lot of the elements and principles of design. I glued in my buttons, and I used at least a minimum of 3 different types of paper to help tell my story. So that's your assignment. 3 different types of paper to use either in the background or within the assignment. Make sure that you have a clear and obvious focal point that reflects to the item that pushes your buttons, and make sure that you have full and complete shading on at least the item that you want to be the focal point, if not other places. So hopefully that helps. Remember, you could also incorporate a surprise element. I can't wait to see the results you create, and we will do a lot more of this in class.